Good morning, everyone. We are continuing How to Work with People based on Swami's wonderful book, The Art of Supportive Leadership. We are still in the chapter, Leadership is Intuition Guided by Common Sense. And we'll probably be here for another day or two. So let's now start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, humbly we bow to all. Dear Swamiji, help us to feel the wisdom of your words, the living power of your guidance, as we make our way from delusion to enlightenment. Guide our footsteps, open our hearts, that we may act in such a way as to always reflect divine love, divine kindness, divine wisdom. Om. Peace. Amen. Okay, so we are transitioning from intuition into common sense, and we have many interesting paragraphs in front of us. Swami writes, I have spent much time in Italy, where people have sought my counsel on diverse issues. How often their reply to a suggestion has been, ma, è difficile, but it's difficult. It's that but that's the killer. One expects a challenge not to be easy. Experience alone, however, that isn't enlivened by creative imagination, too often inserts a but in the hope of killing all further discussion. So Swamiji is touching here, and he's putting it in the context of leadership, but he's really just talking about life. And he's talking about an issue that's so fundamental to all of life and absolutely the critical issue on the spiritual path. So let's spend a little time thinking about it. There's when Swamiji was a monk in Self-Realization Fellowship back in the 50s, and Master put him in charge of the monks, he created a training course, and he gave weekly classes for the monks, just sort of training them in the monastic life. It's very interesting. Swami was very young, but Master knew who he was and knew the wisdom he had. That course gradually got adopted by the nuns, and then gradually Swami's name got separated from it. But it is a very good course. If you're interested in it, I did a long series. It's not on video, it's on audio. It's called The Spiritual Warrior, and you can find it by going to the Ananda Palo Alto site and looking under audio recordings. You can probably find it through Asha Joy. I highly recommend it. Those of you who are serious disciples of this path, it's a very, very good course because of his outline. So it's divided into various sections. The first is the attitudes that are essential for success on the spiritual path. And I dare say the attitudes that are essential for success in life. Just being able to deal with what life will inevitably give you. And he has these 5 or 6 attitudes. Number 1, courage. And because I have taught that course multiple times and read it, and not multiple times, but several times, and have read it, and have had to really think about that and thinking about in my own life, it's a very, very profound statement. Courage. What is it that defeats people in life? There's just too many challenges. There's too many things that don't happen the way that we hope they would happen. Swami was talking once about a a survey that, people do these surveys all the time to find out what's true and what isn't. It's an odd way to try to get truth, is to just ask people what they think. Sort of like the collective. If you get 100,000 people together, none of whom have any wisdom, they won't have more wisdom if you just add up everything that they say. It's just not true. You get an idea of what a lot of people think, but just because a lot of people think it doesn't mean it's any more true. But people were asked what was the most wonderful part of their life. People when they were in their 40s or their 50s. Swami said a surprisingly large number said their high school prom. And that's sort of like, especially for people who don't go on to a lot of higher education, but that's sort of the transition point between childhood and adulthood. When you're 17 or 16 or 18, right there, you're just imagining all the things that you can do, and you've picked out your goals, but you haven't necessarily been trained, because school doesn't really teach us anything that we really need to know, or very little. We haven't really been trained about how to work with our energy, how to concentrate, how to manifest, how to persevere, just any of the things that are required for us to really have success. So we can still just dream and just imagine. And then all the hard realities of life begin to come to us over time. There's an expression that says up until the age of 40, you have the face that you were born with. After the age of 40, you have the face that you make for yourself. Which is to say, whatever your habitual consciousness is over all those years, it begins to reform your features. I had a very interesting entertainment once, standing in front of a mirror with the only face I have. And I was just assuming different attitudes of disappointment or habitual anger or questing after things, or envy or jealousy. I mean, just all these different things. And it was very easy to see how my whole appearance could easily be changed just by the consciousness that I assume, and then how my features, I would habitually hold my face in a certain way because of the attitude I was having. And if we do that year after year after year, then the whole face assumes that look. And it's fascinating. It's actually really fascinating to think about it. Now, coming back to where we are with courage, let's talk about the spiritual path. When we're working to understand that life is a journey of ever-increasing awareness, moving from delusion into enlightenment, we also have to realize that we're bucking the trend. The world around us, especially at this particular age that we're living in, but always, it's a material world that's offering us material satisfaction. And when we decide that we want to live by a higher truth than the average, we're already swimming upstream. Because I've been in a spiritual context my whole adult life, we don't drink, we don't indulge in recreational drugs, we're not always looking for greater stimulation, we don't listen to the popular music, which is ever increasingly harsh and sensual and angry, and we don't go out drinking on the weekends. We're not going out trying to hook up with partners day and night. It's like thousands of things that we're not doing. We're trying to do something else. And it's not as if the impulse is never there, but the conscious decision has been made that this other direction of my energy is, in the long run, going to give me what I really want. I remember when I spent 1 year in college, and I lived in a women's dorm, and I was profoundly and deeply looking for wisdom, and college gives you knowledge, and there's intelligence and there's knowledge, but I found an appalling dearth of wisdom, either in the faculty and in my companions. I would like to say that perhaps there was more there and it just wasn't meant for me. But Divine Mother made pretty sure that I got disillusioned really fast. But I remember I because it was 1966 and the sort of the whole metaphysical idea, drug-induced, psychedelically induced, that that the world was not what it seemed. And whereas Swami Kriyananda has never endorsed recreational, so to speak, drugs at all, he had to admit that when psychedelics swept through my generation, it awoke a lot of people to the fact that reality is not what it seems. That's what some of those psychedelics can do. They can just show you that the material world is just an illusion. And that's what happened to me. I never enjoyed taking drugs, and I didn't do it very much at all. But I did it once, and once, I did it more than once, but once was the critical turn for me, because all of a sudden, you change your consciousness, you change everything. And it was like the answer to the question I'd been asking, how do I make myself different? And I immediately knew that drugs weren't the way, because they come and go and they're completely out of your control, and you've turned your very consciousness over to an alien force, and none of that attracted me. But the fact that you could change consciousness absolutely put everything in order for me. And then I began the quest to find out how to really do that. But I'd always been avid to have a way to really influence my destiny. And what aggravated, distressed me so much was that nobody was talking about that. They were just wanting me to learn stuff and then tell them that I'd learned it. And that just, it was driving me crazy. But in my dormitory, because it's my nature, I was a bit of a counselor for a number of the women there without really knowing anything at all, which also made me very nervous, because I didn't know that much. Well, I did know more than they did. Here's the part that really struck me. They all wanted to be happy. Naturally, we all want to be happy. But they wanted to be happy without having to change anything. And that was the part. It's like, if you're following a path of behavior that is making you very unhappy, let me just try to work this out. If you want to be happy, you're probably going to have to change that way of behaving, and it would be like, isn't this obvious? But I hadn't heard Swami say, ma, è difficile. But that's exactly what I would meet. But I want it to be effortless. I don't want to have to change. That's the word. The courage to accept the challenge. And I've never considered myself a very courageous person. I have become courageous over the years. But I remember that Swami used to use the word challenge as if it were positive. And among the ridiculous things I said to him over the years was suggesting to him that not everyone is inspired by the word challenge. Some people are intimidated by it. And I was more intimidated by challenge than inspired, although I've changed a lot. But in those early years, that's how I felt, because I lacked courage. So yeah, it is difficult. And that's just basically what it is. And somehow or another, see, this is when I started this discussion about intuition, I was talking about the conscious, the subconscious, and the superconscious. Superconscious pulling us to a greater reality, the subconscious wanting us to find comfort in just continuing exactly as we are, the conscious mind being the battleground between these two forces. We have a school for children. We have a K through 12th grade school here now. The K through 8 is more established. The high school is 5 years in and is doing great. We're really making a wonderful full education for kids here. And one of the kindergarten teachers told us about this story. There was a very strong-willed child who was in her class, and one day the child was just using all her energy to misbehave, just all day. And finally the teacher took the child aside and said, you know, what are you doing? And the little girl had it perfectly. She said, you know, an angel sits on one shoulder, one of my shoulders, and a devil sits on the other. Usually I try to listen to the angel, but today I'm just listening to the devil. And I mean, that's it. That's it with all of us. It's a cliche almost to speak like that. The subconscious mind says your happiness will come from ease and pleasure, from familiarity, from lessening your awareness. And that's the key word. Your happiness will come by lessening your awareness. Oh, so we'll turn on the television as soon as we get home and we'll keep it going no matter what. So there'll always just be this noise and this distraction. And then we'll eat really heavy foods. We'll eat lots of sugar. We'll have a glass of wine as soon as we come home, and maybe harder liquor later, and always have some marijuana around so that if anything seems slightly agitating, boom, I'll just lower my consciousness. That's why I didn't like drugs, because it just clouded my awareness. But that's what the subconscious is trying to tell us. The less energy you put out, the less awareness you have, the better you'll feel. So we overindulge in sexuality, we sleep too much, just anything that makes it seem like we have to put out less energy, and it tells us that'll make us happy. Of course, by the time you're 40, and the happiest day of your life was your high school prom, it kind of, if you're thinking, you begin to wonder whether that was really such a good idea. You don't put out effort to really get along with people. You just expect them to get along with you. I don't want, it's just and on like that. The superconscious says the more energy you put out, the more dynamic energy you put out, the more creative energy you put out, the greater your awareness. I'm not going to hide from the truth about things. I'm not going to hide from my own feelings. I'm not going to try to dull my awareness. I want to know. I really want to know. Ma, è difficile. Yes, it's very difficult to have to really face into it, to really say, I'm not as good as I think I am. I was having a conversation with a friend about a psychological syndrome that I'm very familiar with. I believe I have left it behind me, but it was my nemesis for a very long time, and we found some wonderful words for it. It was me and the mythical me. And the mythical me is this perfect one who just sort of has it all together. And then there's the actual me. And I spent a lot of my young life, after I got to Ananda life, when I was really trying to be aware, I kept thinking that if I kept bullying the actual me, then at some point the actual me would just surrender, and then the mythical me would just come out of the closet, and there I'd be. I would just, have it all together, and I don't have faults, I don't have unpleasant feelings, I don't have laziness. The mythical me was perfect, except the mythical me, might deduce, was a myth. And the actual me was the one that I had to make friends with and figure out. The actual me was going to be the foundation of my life. And if I wanted that foundation to be solid, I had to, paradoxically, raise my awareness to understand who the actual me was. And not always just be upset, guilty, furious, in despair because the actual me just wasn't that good. That's all. A friend of mine who had the same syndrome, we sort of were helping her through this. And she came up with a mantra that was perfect. She would say, whenever the actual me would start getting hysterical and hope for the mythical me to come out, she would say, no, I'm perfectly adequate just as I am. And perfectly adequate became the words that she wanted to just use because she was perfectly adequate. And she was actually far better than that. But to just come to peace with the actual me. And then it goes much more out beyond that. It's like life is difficult. Life requires energy. Life is challenging. And and life is different than you think it's going to be. It's just we have all these mythical dreams. That's why in high school we can just hold them. I'm going to be a professional athlete. I'm going to be a movie star. I'm going to make lots of money. You know, just all kinds of things. And we have to raise our awareness to understand who I actually am, what I actually feel, what my talents really are, and then I have to start putting one foot in front of the other if I really want to accomplish them. I read somewhere some successful man said, I'm always being asked how to make $1 million or make $40,000 or $100,000. He said, well, take the $10 you have, put gas in the tank of your car, and drive to work. Yeah, it's like, unfortunately, that's what it comes down to. It comes down to you have to put out consistent, strong, dynamic energy. It doesn't just come to you. Ma, è difficile. Yeah, every single morning. Every single morning you just have to get up. I had a friend, he was actually one of my very early mentors before I met Swamiji. When I was very first learning about the spiritual path, he was a good man. And he had the simple phrase, he said, every day you just have to try to, as he called it, make your day, which is just make your day work, whatever it is. Whatever the job is in front of you, you have to just try to make that day work, which is you have to listen to the angel side of yourself and not the other side of yourself. And the angel side of yourself says, put out a little energy, a little more energy, have a little more courage, be interested in understanding things a little better. When you have a dissonance with someone, don't run away from it. Stand there and try to understand it. But don't try to win against the other person. Try to find out. Just try to find out, who am I? Who is the actual me? How do you perceive me? And when we see ourselves constantly defending so that we get to stay exactly as we are and no input comes in and nobody tells us what to do, and I always stand, it's like, what are you defending? What are we trying to do? It's scary. That's why courage really is being asked of us. And one of the most interesting principles that Swami teaches actually in his superconscious living course, which is where these ideas really come from, because superconsciousness is an expansion of energy and finds joy and satisfaction in the very expression of energy. Often, in the simplest thing we have to ask is, in every circumstance, how can I just put out a little more energy? Now, mythical me just goes in and does it perfectly. Actual me just puts out a little more energy. And it's a fascinating actual personal discipline. It's the equivalent of putting the gas in your tank and going to work. Instead of out here having some big vision of who I'm going to become, actually, like, look at the room you're living in. Is it clean? Is it tidy? Is there a lot of, what I love the phrase from Feng Shui, blocked qi, which is energy that's just blocked because there's disorder in this corner, there's an unresolved issue over here, there's something that we don't like and we can't figure out how to solve over here. You just start with your environment. What is my world like here? And how can I put out a little more energy to be a little more aware, to creatively solve, to face the challenges that I'm facing? Swami actually said the comment once that a very disorderly house is often a sign of an inability to face life itself. And now we're talking slightly more extremes. Swami, there is a difference between what the word the word we use is tamasic, which is really downward pulling energy, and creative disorder. So creative disorder is when you're doing a lot of things, and it's easier not to put everything away because you're really active. But tamasic energy is, well, I mean, I just actually this morning just spent a little bit of time because there was tamasic energy accumulating in the room in this house and where I live. And it was there because I didn't want to face it. It's like when you start really looking at it, oh yeah, that piece of clothing is ripped and it has to be fixed. Oh yeah, that's an issue that has to be resolved and I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to keep moving the papers from left to right and then from right to left and then from left to right again. And oh yeah, these books are sitting here because I was going to read this, but I'm not really going to read it. And think about that. All of that around you all the time talking to you. Everywhere you look, there's something that's reminding you of something you don't want to face. So what we have to do, we're talking about leadership, common sense, intuition, but all of this is just about who am I. And the thing about problems is, this I believe to be true. I had this woman come and tell me once, talk to me, counseling. When I had a palm reader, yes, all these things are true. I had a palm reader look at my hands once, and I don't know what it is, but apparently there's lots of tiny little lines in my hands. And she said, no matter what you did, you would become a counselor. She said, no matter what path you set out for, because that's just what you're doing. So this woman came and she was talking to me. And she was very upset because she was very angry at her mother. And she had reasonably good cause to be angry at her mother. Her mother had not been a very nice woman to her. She had this enormous anger and she was very concerned about it. And it was monstrous. It was this huge mountain that lived in the middle of her life. And it was quite clear that, actual me and mythical me was going to be able just to forgive her mother and get rid of it. Actual me was not anywhere close to that. So I said to her, your response to this difficulty in your life has been anger. I said, so obviously you have an inclination to go toward anger. So are you expressing anger in other areas of your life where it's, not so critical? No, not at all, she said, just like that. Really. But I knew her, and we sort of gradually worked it out. Like when you're in the freeway and the traffic is bad and you're alone in your car, what is your response? When you come into the break room at the office and people have left a lot of dirty dishes in the sink, what is your response? When you are hoping for a package to be delivered that was promised to be delivered but it doesn't come, what is your response? When people don't do the work they were supposed to do and then it causes trouble to you, what is your response? And she had never raised her awareness sufficiently or had the courage to really ask that question. But her response to every frustration was anger. But because it would flash, it would, it didn't compare to what she felt for her mother, she didn't recognize it. I said, you're not going to be able to deal with the feeling that you're dealing with your mother, but you can start breaking the habit of anger. You can start nibbling around the edges, and this is the phrase that Swami gave me. You can practice where it's easier. You practice where it's easier, and you develop confidence in the actual me that I can overcome this quality in me. And it's not dramatic. It's not very interesting. It's every single day you go to work. You just go to work and realize what the issues are that I'm really going to have to work with. And the fact that it's difficult, yeah, that's what it is. But reality always wins. So we either face into it or we waste another incarnation and then face into it later. So, my friends, God bless you.